Hey, welcome. We're so glad that you joined us for Wednesday worship. As Josh said, we're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 17, looking at Moses, looking at what his life was like as a change maker, as a person who actually did justice, lived out justice calling, lived out what it was like to be a change maker. Last week, Nate talked about what these change making moments mean to us and how our life can be changed by just doing specific things. There are moments in our life that shape us, that form us into who we are. There are memories when you look back on life that are filled with maybe joy or love or hope or fun. I look back on my life and there are seasons. Specifically, when I was young, I was living in Bainbridge Island, Washington, a ferry ride from Seattle, Washington, across the Puget Sound, in this small 2-story house on 5 acres that backed up to this national forest. And my memories of living there were living wild, to be honest with you, of waking up in the morning, grabbing some food, running out into the woods, building tree forts, building underground forts, running through the creeks, exploring abandoned buildings, and being out there for what seemed like months. And I asked my mom a while back, I said, here's my memory. My memory was I would wake up in the morning and I would come home at dark and I would do this for years. I said, is that really what it was like? She said, you were gone a lot. She said, you would leave in the morning, but then you would straggle through 2 or 3 times a day. She said, you'd come through and you'd grab some food or you'd grab a drink, then you'd go back out, you'd climb a tree. She said, oftentimes I'd find you just sitting up in a tree, dreaming and imagining. And I look back on those moments with just unbelievable memories that sparked my thirst for adventure, to be honest with you. But if you look at change-making moments that spark our justice calling, those oftentimes come from seasons of pain or suffering or injustice. About 5 years ago, I was in Haiti. I was riding on the back of a motorcycle with my friend Oda Ness. Oda Ness at the time was our country director, and I would trust Oda Ness with my life. Well, to be honest with you, I was, because I was sitting on the back of the motorcycle, hurling through Port-au-Prince traffic. And as we're flying through traffic, I'm leaning forward, and we're having conversations, and we're laughing, and we're joking. And as we're coming up to the compound where our group was staying, I don't know what Odiness and I were doing. We'd been gone for a couple hours. We were meeting the team there, and it was a compound of about 30, 40 houses, and our team was staying in one of them. And as we pulled up to the gate, the guard came out and he just does this. And he's looking at Odiness and he says something to him. And Odiness says something back and he points. And the guard says something and points again. And they begin exchanging words. And it was loud and it was quickly and it was heated. And so if you've been to Port-au-Prince, you understand that it was a normal conversation. But then it kind of took a turn. And I could tell Odiness was getting angry and the guard was getting mad. And I'm trying to decipher what was going on. And all of a sudden, I leaned forward to Odiness from the back of the motorcycle, and I said, is he saying that you can't go in? He said, yeah, he says that you can go in, but I can't. I said, why is he saying that? He says, you're white, I'm black. And I don't remember too much of what happened next, other than that my head disconnected from my body. But I said, Odiness, you're from Haiti. I'm a visitor. Why isn't he letting you in? He said he doesn't trust me. He said he trusts you, and you can go in, but I have to stand here and wait. Again, don't fully remember what happened next. But Odiness and I walked through the gate together. In fact, I took the bike from Odiness, and I pushed the bike for him, and I had Odiness walk in front of me. And I just remember that moment of just feeling this extreme feeling of injustice and not comprehending how that could be. You know, I've grown up privileged. I grew up around the world, but that was a hard moment for me of having to deal with an injustice. But there's seasons also of pain and suffering. If you've known me, you've heard me share stories like this before of being in India as an 8th grader and having this little girl tap me on my shoulder and turning around and seeing her with her arm out and seeing her arm just snapped over and over and over again. And having the man tell me her mom did that to her so that she can make more money as a beggar. realizing that the rest of her life will be in pain and suffering because she was born into a caste that says that she has to be a beggar. That pain, that suffering, that injustice, that will grip you in your soul. I remember a couple months before that, my dad took me to a leper colony up in northern Thailand. And I remember going around and my dad having me shake people's hands and thinking that my arm was literally going to fall off. And I remember my dad telling me, you need to see things like this because when you return to America, your eyes won't see this anymore. You have to understand that these things of injustice are happening all around the world. Before my family moved to Chandler, we lived in Guatemala. And our house had a 15-foot wall, concrete wall around it. On top of the wall, it had razor wire, and through the razor wire, we had bougainvilleas growing. Inside our house and inside our compound, we had a German Shepherd guard dog. Outside, we had a guard that walked around us, and we had a metal gate. And every time somebody knocked on the door, the guard dog went crazy, and we'd have to go up on top of the roof and look down to make sure there wasn't an ambush or make sure it was safe. Remember one day we had a knock on the door, and I went and looked, and I saw there was a lady with 3 kids standing there, and she was holding them. So my wife went and opened the door, and she talked to the lady. My wife was fluent in Spanish. And the lady was asking for some food, and all her kids were completely naked. And she said, do you have anything I could clothe my kids with? So our kids were standing there watching, and they immediately ran up to their rooms, and they got clothing, and they got toys. And my wife got some food, and they all sat out on the front step, and they clothed the kids. They gave them some toys, and they ate some food. And for months, that lady came back every single Wednesday, and my family sat down with them. You know, we're called to go and be with the poor and the helpless. We're called to sit in the pain and the suffering. We're called to be right in the middle of the injustice. And these change-making moments that spark our justice calling come from stepping into the uncomfortable. But oftentimes what we feel like, and I hear this so often, is we don't feel like we have what it takes, or we're not the type of person who is the change maker. We don't have the ability to go out and do justice. I'd like to change the narrative because I believe all of us have what it takes to go out and do justice, to become the type of person that is known as a change maker. One of the things that I like to do in my life is I love to study great leaders, whether that's in business, whether that's historically. I love to look at how they became successful, what's their story. And oftentimes when you look at them, most often, they had to overcome great adversity or great struggles. When I look in Scripture, I love to look at how God used consistently people that were failures, how Jesus constantly surrounded himself with the less than, with the broken, with the people that you and I honestly wouldn't be sitting with. And yet you see time and time again, those are the people that God uses. You see, Moses in the Bible is considered the greatest prophet, and I would argue one of its greatest leaders. But if you look at Moses, the first thing he does as a leader is he murders someone. The second thing he does is he runs and he hides in the desert for 40 years. The third thing he does is he tells God that he has the wrong person. The fourth thing he does is he tells God, you know what, God, I'm not a good communicator. He then reminds him that, you know what, I have a stuttering problem. I'm not a good speaker. You have the wrong person. He does everything in his power to convince God to choose someone else. When he finally steps into the path that God had before him, God sends his brother Aaron to be a communicator for him, to walk with him. You see, when God calls you to fight for the oppressed, to stand up for the hurting, to sit with the poor, to love on the lost at a deeper level, to walk with the other. When he calls you into these places to step into a passion, very rarely does he ask you to do this alone. Every person I know that is a significant change maker is doing it as a team. You see, in Exodus chapter 17, verse 8, it says, the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands." Now it's just an abrupt story. It just starts. We're being attacked. Joshua, choose some people. Go, I'll have the staff. And Joshua just goes. If you back up a little bit in the story to understand how they got to that place, we know the story. They leave Egypt. They cross the Red Sea. They all walk on dry land. It's this amazing miracle God performs for them. 3 days after that happens, they're without water, and they begin to grumble against Moses. So Moses comes and he cries to the Lord. He says, the people are complaining. And so God shows them how to get water. 15 days later, they're hungry. They're complaining. There's no food. God says to them, I will rain down bread from heaven. A couple days later, in Exodus chapter 17, at the very beginning, they're thirsty again. So they're quarreling with Moses, and they said, give us water to drink. Moses says to them, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to test? So Moses then cries out to God, what am I to do with these people? They're almost ready to stone me. Have you ever been in these places where it feels like everyone around you is constantly complaining or constantly beating you down or constantly, it just feels like it's a never-ending battle. It's like you're banging against your head against the wall over and over again. And I feel like that's what Moses must have felt like. He knew he was in the place that God was calling him to be. He had surrounded himself with people like Joshua and Aaron and Hur. And yet he's constantly dealing with this griping and complaining and arguing. And so he's turning to God and he says, what am I supposed to do? And so Joshua, he turns to him and he says, Joshua, you know the people better than I do. Go out and pick the people you trust, the people you know that can go to the front lines and that can fight, and that will stand with you. And then Joshua hears Moses and sees him say, I have the staff of the Lord, and I will stand on the hill above you. To the common person, that may mean nothing, but to Joshua, who's been watching with him, you see, he's seen Moses do these amazing miracles through the Lord. And so Joshua understands that this is something that God is in. So this isn't just a war that he's entering into. This is God's provision. This is God's guidance and leading. So Joshua knows he's been sent out. And so it says, Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. And as long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone, put it underneath him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. You see, there's 3 types of changemakers in this story. There's the person leading. There's Moses. You see, God called him to lead his people. It was very clear, if you know the story of Moses, that God was very intentional that Moses was to lead the people out of Egypt. If you look at every successful organization, church, every single one of them has a leader that people want to follow. The date today is August 5th, which means tomorrow is August 6th. On August 6th, 2006, my family moved to Chandler. We moved and we landed here and began our time at the Grove. And I remember for 6 months before that, we were praying about where we were supposed to go. There was a church in Grand Rapids that had 10,000 people that had asked me to come serve there. There was a church in Oregon that asked me. There was a large church in Wisconsin that was talking to me. And then there was this church called the Grove in Chandler, Arizona. I'd never heard of Chandler, that had 200 people with this guy named Chin Chin, who I thought was Asian, which I thought was perfect because I grew up in Thailand, and that's exactly where I wanted to be. And the more I talked to this Chin Chin guy, the more I heard about his passion for justice, the more I heard about his dream to start a college, the more I heard about his story of growing up in Africa, the more I heard about his desire to step into battling social injustices and to be willing to step into the front lines. the more I realized that I wanted to stand with this guy. And I remember coming here and realizing that this is the place that I need to be because of my skill set. And sure, it would have been great to be at a church with 10,000 people, but sometimes it's an amazing journey to get in the front lines of building a place that fights social injustice and standing behind somebody that says, I'm willing to take those lumps. And you know, when you lead a church like the Grove that is missional, you have people that say things about you and talk about you. And I'll be honest, words hurt. But when you are following where God is calling you to be, it's an amazing journey. And so Moses, as he stood there with his arms up, they knew that they were winning the battle. But like all great leaders, we get through seasons where we get tired, and so his arms begin to tire. So Aaron and Hur hold his arms up. But before that, as they're holding the arms up, you have this guy Joshua who's on the front lines. And I relate to Joshua because that's the type of person I love to be. The person that can take the vision of the Moses and run with it and lead with it and know that you're bringing that to the lost, to the hurting, to the broken, to bringing that out into the world. When the earthquake happened in Haiti in 2010, I sat there in my bed that night Googling and looking at it, and I thought, I have to get to Haiti. I came into work that morning, and I was trying to figure out how I could tell Palmer I need to go to Haiti. And he called me into his office, and he says, I need you to go to Haiti, and I'm going to go with you. And I instantly was like, we need to be there. Yesterday, when the explosion happened in Beirut, Lebanon, I instantly started texting Caleb and Nicolette Hutcherson, our missionaries, who live 2.5 miles away from where the explosion was. And they're texting me back, and they're talking about how they're okay and the destruction, the chaos. In the same breath, I'm Googling flights to Beirut, and I'm looking at it. The problem with people like me is they jump the gun oftentimes, and my wife looked at me, and she says, this is not the time for you to go to Beirut. You see, God calls different types of people into different places, and he makes some of us to be Moseses and some of us to be Joshuas, to be on those front lines. But I believe that all of us can be Aaron and Hur. See, Aaron and Hur stood there and held his arms up. When we first started going missionally into some of these countries, I'd have people that would join me, and they'd come back just wrecked. And they'd say, you know, we need to change this country we went to. And so they'd start these nonprofits. And they'd start the nonprofits, and they'd get 2 years into them, and they'd become tired, and they'd come to me, and they'd say, hey, I've been doing this nonprofit for 2 years, but I'm tired. I don't want to do it anymore. Can you take over? My answer was always no. Because what I want to do is stand behind the people that are leading in the country. And so I went and met with every country leader that we work with. And I sat down with them and I said, you're my Moses. I'm Aaron or Hur. I'd prefer to be Aaron. I don't want to be Hur, but I'll be Aaron. And I just want to stand behind you, and I just want to hold your arms up. And we as a church at the Grove, we want to stand behind you, and we want to support you. We want to lift you up however we can do that. As staff here at the Grove, our job is to stand behind Palmer and to hold his arms up. As we go through this COVID season, it's like nothing we've ever been. But what I've noticed is we've been able to hold each other's arms up. What I've been able to witness is Palmer being able to reach out and go through this journeys with other pastors in the area and how they're holding each other's arms up. There's so many different areas that we can do this. And then today's day and age, when we have so many different opinions about the things that are going on all around us. One of the people that I've been trying to stand behind is a girl named Jaden who sings on our stage every now and then. She's a 21-year-old African-American woman who's had an incredibly difficult life. And my wife has been mentoring her for years. My family has been praying with her. She's been over at our house multiple times for dinner. And I really feel that our calling is to walk with her, to listen to her. And I called Jaden a while back and said, Jaden, I just want to walk with you. I want to hold your arms up. I want my family to pray with you. And so we've been able to do that through that season, and I've seen how that has not only changed my perspective. Jaden and I don't agree on everything, but I've been able to see life through her eyes. And that's not only changed my perspective, but it's changed my daughter's perspective. You see, I think that needs to be our posture right now. I think most of us need to look at the life of the other, the person who is different than us. And the question that I have for you is, whose arms can you hold up right now? Who can you stand behind? Who can you lift up? Who needs to hear your words of love instead of your opinion? And we are so full of opinions right now. And our words are so destructive. If you want to be a change maker, if you want to do justice, then stand behind someone who is doing it and hold their arms up. God, I just thank you for who you are. I thank you for how you call us to live the type of love where we stand behind people, where we hold their arms up, where we have the courage to step into injustices, to run into the front lines when you call us, to know that you are standing there, but also to have the strength to hold up the arms of the leaders around us, to pray for our pastors, to step through life with them, to pray for the hurting, the broken, to instead of judging the person that looks different than us, to try to understand how their viewpoint and their life is. God, I pray that you'll help us to be people who do justice. In Jesus' name, amen.